Today we're joined by two inspirational storytellers from Oracle Team USA. Julian Guthrie, she's the author of The Billionaire and the Mechanic, and we're also joined by Joseph Ozanne, who is an engineer with Oracle Team USA. Please join me in welcoming them to Google. Thank you very much.
So my book, The Billionaire and the Mechanic, How Larry Ellison and a Car Mechanic Teamed Up to Win Sailing's Greatest Race, the America's Cup, it's been out for about a month. Its official pub date was June 4th, and we've had a great reception. Happily, it landed. It's a national bestseller, and this last weekend I noticed it was number 9 on the Northern California bestseller list. And we also have an option on it for a film. So I hope you like the book, because at some point you may see it as a feature film. And I'll be taking suggestions later for who should play Larry. And that will be interesting coming from here. And who will play the mechanic, whose name is Norbert Byron, and he's a great part of this story. He is the Commodore of the Golden Gate Yacht Club today, and he was in 2001 when this all was launched. So this is a story really about these two men who seem so different, the billionaire and the mechanic, and their singular quest for the America's Cup, which is the oldest trophy in international sports. And I started this story because I was really interested in the drama of going after the cup, but again, this unusual partnership between Larry and Norbert. And Norbert, as I said, was the Commodore of the Golden Gate Yacht Club, which this was in 2001. The yacht club, for those of you who may know it, it's down beyond, past the better-known, more elite St. Francis Yacht Club. When I went there, when Norbert became Commodore, it was basically a sinking ship. It was $450,000 in debt, and he feared he had been named the Commodore who would close the doors and lower the burgee. So he was reaching out, grasping at straws, trying to find a way to save this old blue-collar boating institution on the San Francisco waterfront, when he read, lo and behold, that Larry Ellison and Oracle Racing had had a falling out with the St. Francis. And he thought, well, why can't our little club be the sponsoring club of Oracle Racing? And everybody around him said, "You're nuts, this is never gonna happen. Why would Oracle Racing and Larry Ellison partner with this kind of unknown club, sinking in debt?" Well, he didn't listen to the naysayers, and he made the deal happen along the way. In about 3 months, I think he lost about 30 pounds, and he was working at the radiator shop by day, and he was negotiating this deal at night, and he was trying to save the little Golden Gate Yacht Club and make it into the little engine that could. So they formed this unlikely friendship and partnership that exists today. And so this story is about the two of them, but it's also about many of the builders and the sailors and the engineers who dreamed for much of their lives of being a part of a winning America's Cup team. Whether it's a Jimmy Spithill, the sailor of Oracle Racing, who dreamed from when he was a child of being a part of winning the America's Cup on the sailboat. He's an Australian, and he was 4 years old, I believe, when Australia wrested the cup away from America in 1983 after the longest winning streak in sports. And parties rang out on his beach for weeks, and he thought, I'm going to be a part of this someday, and he was. Or whether it's Joseph Ozanne, who wanted from the time he was a child to be a part of of this thing called the America's Cup, but not to be on the boat, but to be someone who designed, who engineered the boats. And so my book tells the story of the dreams, the human drama, the unlikely partnerships, the losses that led to the ultimate victory in 2010. So I'm going to read just a couple of very quick vignettes from the book. And this book starts in the Sydney to Hobart race of 1998, which I'm sure most of you have heard about. It was at the time the worst maritime disaster in Australian history. Larry Ellison, who is an accomplished sailor, he was racing on his boat Sayonara, and they had just come through the eye of the hurricane, which was not predicted, so they were all taken by surprise and felt that they that their lives were definitely in danger. So this is when they've come out of the eye of the hurricane, and this is an important place to start the book and to start this story, because for one thing, after Larry Ellison completed this race, he said, no more open ocean racing. I'm done with this. I'm going for around the buoys regattas. But it also, for him, reminded him of the impermanence of all things, of the fragile state of life as we know it. And that is something that has stayed with him today. And this race was very significant, remains very significant in his life. And I'm reading this part that, as a writer, I'm very proud of, because I think that it's very evocative, and I love the language of it. So thanks for humoring me a little bit. On the morning of the third day, the sun was just coming up as Sayonara entered the Derwent River, an estuary leading to the capital of Tasmania. A salmon pink light cut through the mauve morning sky. The crew of Sayonara, the first to reach the Derwent, was welcomed by a small powerboat with a man on board playing Scottish Highland bagpipes, the traditional welcome for a winning boat. On this day, the songs were somber. The wind was a whisper, blowing at less than 8 knots. Larry and his crew were in the river valley, and the wildflowers, fern, and towering trees carpeted deep-cut canyons with red dirt ridges. The wildflowers in shades of blue, white, crimson, purple, and heather were bathed in soft pink light. Larry closed his eyes for a moment, listening to the sounds of the bagpipe and to the waves gently lapping at the sides of the boat. The air was perfectly calm, the waves like a reassuring heartbeat. The glory of life was theirs. So that was, as I said, that was a very significant turning point, surviving the Sydney to Hobart and coming out of that. So I'm going to jump around a little bit, and the next scene I'm going to read just a little bit from, and I'm going to cut my talk a little bit short because I want to get to Joseph, because his story is really fantastic, and you're going to see some great video. It's going to astound you of the new boats and of the boat that won the America's Cup for Oracle Racing in 2010. So I'm going to read something, and this is, when I was interviewing Larry Ellison, we got to talking about his friendship with Steve Jobs, and about the time that the two of them spent together. And he gave me a lot of great detail on their friendship and their talks. And here is one where they are walking the grounds of Larry's then under construction Woodside estate and talking about who was the greatest person ever. Yeah. So you can make your own guesses as to who you think they will each choose. It's kind of an interesting Rorschach test. So here's Larry talking. I'm talking about greatness, about taking a lever to the world and moving it, Larry said, walking the grounds of his new Woodside property with his best friend, Steve Jobs. I'm not talking about moral perfection. I'm talking about people who changed the world the most during their lifetime. Jobs, who had returned to Apple 3 years earlier, enjoyed the conversational volleying and placed Leonardo da Vinci and Gandhi as his top choices, with Gandhi in the lead. Leonardo, a great artist and inventor, lived in violent times and was a designer of tanks, battlements, ramparts, and an assortment of other military tools and castle fortifications. Larry joked that had Leonardo not been gay, he would have been, quote unquote, a perfect fit for the Bush administration. Jobs, who had studied in India, cited Gandhi's doctrine of nonviolent revolution as an example of how it was possible to remain morally pure while aggressively pursuing change. Larry's choice for history's greatest person could not have been more different from Gandhi. His choice was the Corsican-born military leader Napoleon Bonaparte. Here's Larry talking. Napoleon overthrew kings and tyrants throughout Europe, created a system of free public schools, and wrote one set of laws that applied to everybody. Napoleon achieved liberal ends through conservative means, Larry argued. Steve and Larry argued about everything, including music and art. When Larry said he thought Paul Simon's lyrics for The Boxer were brilliant, Larry laughed and said, Steve laughed and said Larry didn't know goodness from greatness. Dylan, Jobs said, is the genius of our time. It never stopped. No one gave in, and they both enjoyed the rallying. Before Larry and Steve parted ways, Larry mentioned recent regattas he had won on Sayonara, and he talked about the America's Cup race he was readying for. Steve was interested in the materials and the innovations, whether the mylar used on the sails or the grade of carbon fiber in the hulls. Part of Larry's job, as he saw it, was to tempt and corrupt his friend with boats and planes so that he would have more fun and more time. Steve was always concerned about conspicuous consumption. He liked cars and motorcycles, but never spent a lot of money. What he loved was designing and redesigning things to make them more useful and more beautiful. I think this is a neat little anecdote here. Larry was on the Apple board in 2000 when he had the idea that Apple should give Steve a 40 million Gulfstream jet so he could more efficiently take his family to Hawaii for long weekends. Immediately, Steve started designing the interior of his new plane, studying Larry's Gulfstream and making improvements on Larry's design. When he noticed that Larry had one button to open a door and another button to close it, can you imagine? Steve decided on a single toggle switch that would do both on his plane. Steve reversed the placement of the sink and the shower in the bathroom on his plane, among other changes. Larry agreed that Steve's redesigns were improvements. Larry, sure he would eventually hook his best friend on the draw of the sea, also lent Steve his boat for family vacations. Steve returned home after 10 days aboard Katana and enthused, "No one bothers you on the boat. You can read and think and watch the sky change colors at the end of the day." Soon, Steve was showing Larry designs for his beautiful boat to be named Aqua. Well, the boat didn't end up being named Aqua. It's called Venus, and it's my belief it was recently completed, and that Lorraine and their family is enjoying it now. But that was one thing that Larry was able to, quote unquote, corrupt his best friend about. So now we're going to move quickly back to the America's Cup. And I included the Steve Jobs, Larry Ellison scene, and there's also a scene at Steve's memorial service, which has never been reported before, because the book is very much about dreamers, and it's about finding innovations in whatever you do, which Joseph is going to talk about. So this is a very, very small vignette that I'm going to read about America, the first boat that won the America's Cup for the United States in 1851. And it's going to be a great contrast to the boat that Joseph is going to talk about and that I'm going to read one little final vignette about. How are we doing on time? So this boat was built in the 1840s for around $20,000. And the boat that won the America's Cup that raced basically for 2 races was a $40 million boat. So there have been a few advancements in that regard as well. So this is a little vignette about America. America, offered up as the United States' finest display of innovation on the water, was a 95-foot black gaff-rigged schooner with a concave bow, low freeboard, and cotton sails, said to hold their shape better than the flax sails of the British yachts and shaped on the lines of a pilot boat. She had set sail from New York's East River in June and was manned throughout her Atlantic crossing by Captain W.H. Brown and a crew of 12 men. Brown had built America for $20,000 in cash. The Marquis of Anglesey, a member of the Royal Yacht Squadron, formed in 1815 and the first club in England granted the royal designation, took one look at America and said, "If she is right, we are all wrong." And another Brit remarked that America looked like a quote-unquote hawk among pigeons. So now we're going to move to the final little vignette that I have. And if America was a hawk among pigeons, then we'll have to come up with good descriptives for this USA 17. Larry called it his black pterodactyl, and it would certainly be up there with a peregrine falcon, going back to the birds. So this is where Joseph's story really comes into this book, although he had been engineering, designing boats for years before. So this is when Oracle Racing has lost twice. 2003, 2007, Larry's been called a chump, been likened to a modern-day Sir Thomas Lipton, and he came back with what he thought would be a winning formula, and that was hire Russell Coutts, the winningest skipper in America's Cup history, and build a boat the likes of which had never been seen before. So this is a pretty exciting part of the story. 1 month after the issue of the venue was decided, 50 men in 2 enormous cranes came together on the San Diego docks to hoist a brand new rigid wing made of carbon fiber and Kevlar and wrapped in white aeronautical film onto USA 17. The wing had grown from 150 feet to 196 feet to 206 feet and finally to an astounding 230 feet. At 23 stories, it was too tall to fit under the Golden Gate Bridge. The wing was approximately the same area as a football field, but as fragile as an egg. To better understand the power of the rigid wing, Jimmy Spithill had spent 2 weeks taking an intensive course in flying. He figured the best way to learn to sail this aerodynamic wonder was to get his pilot's license. So on a rare break, he returned home to Australia, visited a small country airfield, and explained to the guys what he wanted to do. His flight instructor, also a sailor, took him out every day for hours at a time in weather that grounded other planes. Jimmy was immediately struck by the similarities between flying and sailing. A well-set-up plane, one driven smoothly, was easy to fly and had less drag. In the same way, a properly balanced boat, trimmed well, was easy to sail. The experience hooked him on flying. When Jimmy stepped aboard USA 17, which they called the Beast, he briefly looked up. It was as if someone had ripped the wing off of a jetliner and placed it on his boat. The plan for the day had been to go out and take it slow and easy so the crew could gradually begin to get a feel for the huge wing-sailed boat. But the boat wanted to fly, and once Dirk de Ridder started to trust the data, Jimmy felt like a jockey trying to hold back his horse. He asked Scott Ferguson, a designer on board, whether he could fly a hull and accelerate USA 17 to a much higher speed. Now is as good a time as any, Ferguson said, holding his breath. As the boat outperformed anyone's expectations, Ferguson had tears in his eyes. Joseph Ozanne and Mike Drummond watched in awe as their experimental side project became the main event. Larry had been told to get to San Diego as soon as possible so he could see the wingsail. As he approached Lindbergh Field near the San Diego harbor, he banked his CJ-4 twin jet over the harbor and looked down. That's when he saw the winged trimaran for the first time. Seeing the boat from the air, he thought to himself, "Oh my God, what have we done? This is madness." When USA 17 returned to the docks, the entire team of engineers, builders, and sailors were there. They still had a regatta to win in Valencia, but they had already pulled off one of the biggest engineering victories in maritime history. So Joseph is a very interesting guy, and you're going to love seeing the video and hearing him talk and asking us questions after. But he was 29 when he joined Oracle Racing in 2004. And he was told after the 2007 loss to go off and investigate this rigid wing and see if this can be done. And mostly it was this, what you called a utopian idea, right? That it was kind of fantastical. And he had graduated from a very prestigious university, Super Aero, in France, which was dedicated to aerospace. And there's a funny story about when I was talking with him that he told me about how his professors used to rib him about, why are you at an aerospace school when you're interested in studying boat design? And so why was that? What was it for you that was so interesting about boats?
First, because there is no other option, because finding a good school for learning boat design is not easy. And also because now, it's the same. A boat is such a complex machine that it's the same physics behind that. And you've got wings on a sailboat, except that the wing, instead of being horizontal, is being vertical. And now you've got it's aerodynamics, so it's the same concept behind that. So it's a great way to learn. Aircraft have been designed for years and years, and they are just very nice machine now. And as a boat designer, you try to use what's done on this field and to apply all the techniques of aeronautics in the boat design. Is just like amazing because we can do great things, and we have now the machine. The machine you're gonna see on the video are just amazing, and it's just like little aircraft, and so it literally fly above the water.
So the wing sail that reached 230 feet, the largest wing ever built for air or for sea, was largely. There were other people working on it, but Joseph again took it from this utopian vision to a reality that. That boat, the likes of which will not be seen again. But so now, how does what you learned there apply to what we're going to see? Because we're going to see this video clip a little bit. You'll see the end of 2010. You'll see USA 17, the trimaran, and then you'll see these new boats.
Yeah. So basically, when we design a boat, the way we work and when we race, especially America's Cup, the only thing that matters for us, it's being fast on the water. So whatever we do, we just do it for. Being faster and faster. So the speed is really the only criteria we're looking at. And at the end, so when we designed USA 17, there was no rigid wing initially, and we just looked for solution to go even faster on the water. And the rigid wing was a solution that was, maybe was kind of obvious, but it was just such a project and such a scale that was a bit an unknown in terms of was it feasible, was it manageable, and at the end of the day, we designed and built this wing, and it's just like it was a success. Thanks to that, the America's Cup we won the America's Cup, and the America's Cup is here in San Francisco now. So it's just like. Nice story for that.
It is a nice story, yeah. But also an interesting story because it brings together the part of the various parts of an America's Cup team: the engineers, the builders, and the sailors. And Joseph and his peers had to work with the sailors to kind of help them understand this new way of sailing that was very data-driven. And can you talk a little bit about that?
What's fascinating is, so we have obviously a sailing team, which is, an amazing sailing team. So we work with the best sailor in the world. And it's just as an amateur sailor, it's always very impressive to have this guy around you. It's just like you work with the best guy in the sport. So initially, we are seen like engineers. So we are computer guys, and just on the paper we can't really interact with them. So we spend a lot of time talking to them and exchanging ideas, and we have discussion about what's happening on the water, what's happening on the computer. And what's really interesting is, so they kind of like the idea of having a wing, but obviously they had no idea how to use it. So for us, our job is to model the wing and model the boat, so we know how to trim it, what's the best settings, and it was kind of it's kind of weird for them to have a new tools like that, and so when you have to tell them how to use it. So you ended up in a situation where you give advice how to sail a boat to the best guy in the world, So they've been doing this job for years and years, and you ended up like, no, you should trim your boat or your wing that way. And said, initial reaction could have been, yeah, who are you to tell me that? But then, little by little, you build kind of a relationship and a trust between the sailors and the designers, and you end up doing great things. So at the end, it's really an interaction with with two different worlds, and that's great about America's Cup, is to see this technology being this bridge between the two worlds. You know.
Do you want to show
I think we could. Yeah, at least we have an idea of what we're talking about. Yeah. So I'm gonna go. So obviously the rigid wing is part of this technology now, and it's a pretty well-known technology, and we make a lot of progress on that. And also now the boats are flying above the water. So you saw in the video that you don't have any more hull immersed. So it's really a brand new world, brand new era for sailing, and it's where for us as a designer, it's just like a super exciting challenge. And because we have new, we bring sailing in a new dimension, so we need to work with the third dimension. Now we can lift the boat above the water, and we have like problems to solve, like exactly like in flight mechanics. So we need to work on stability to be able to maintain the flight and how you can drive these things. And so it's really the focus is. I mean, we didn't look for flying at any price, you know. Just went there because it was the fastest solution. So we just, like with our approach, we just try to design the boat and we look for solutions, and you ended up with this kind of machine. And I think this is really a machine. It's really a sailing machine. We can go 2 or 3 times the wind speed. So whatever is the wind, we can double or triple the speed of the wind just without any engine. So it's just like you ended up with an incredible piece of technology, and this is, I think, the fascinating part of our job is to be able to understand how this very complex system works. So it's really a machine that works in between two. I mean, you've got the air and you've got the water, and so it's, I think, to my mind, is a bit more complex than even an aircraft, because aircraft you only have air around, and it's just like always symmetrical, always in the same direction. Where on a sailboat, you need to have the interaction between what's happening in the air and what's happening in the water. And whatever you do, one part is affecting the other one. So it's like whatever rudder angle you give or whatever change of direction you have, it's going to affect the flow above as well. It's going to affect the engine. So at the end, I mean, what I call the engine is going to affect the wing. So at the end, it's really a complex equation to solve. And what's fascinating, and I think it's also fascinating to work with the sailors for that purpose, is because you have to, we give them a machine, but they have to understand how to use it. So it's really understanding this equation it's very complex and very exciting, because then when you see this kind of picture and this kind of speed, I think it's quite a success and it's quite a good thing for the sport as well. So
well, now you have a wing in the air, and then you have the winglets underneath. So you've got these wings above and wings below that you're designing, which is very cool looking.
That's why you can learn from aircraft, you know, because basically we have a wing, vertical, to propel the boat, and we also, now we reach some speed that we can lift the boat exactly like a normal wing. You lift the boat in the water. So we've got hydrofoils, and the boat, roughly the one you saw, are roughly 7 tons, the platform plus the wing plus the crew. So you can lift really your boat with the speed we're reaching. You can really lift the boat above the water. So you ended up creating a 7-ton force to lift the weight of the boat from this little horizontal wing that are below the water. So with maybe 1 or 2 square meters of carbon, you can just literally fly above the water, and you ended up reaching speed of 40-45 knots, which is roughly 50 miles an hour. So it's really, I mean, especially in San Francisco, when you ride, I mean, you sail along the Golden Gate Bridge. I think the limit on the Golden Bridge is 45 miles an hour. So you just go faster than the car. So it's just like, so it's quite interesting, and it's quite fascinating for that purpose. And, yeah.
So is this better than you imagined, or is it like when you were thinking about, I could be a part of this design team or engineering team, or how far the design and the sport has gone? I mean,
I think the sky is the limit. Normally you can go, I mean, we can,
the sky is the limit,
yeah, the thing is basically you try always, I mean, we do everything we can to go faster. And what's interesting here is inside the America's Cup, you still have a rule to follow. So there is we've got a 30 pages document that gives a rule. So everybody has more or less the same boat. So this is, I mean, as an engineer, it's very interesting because you need to be the fastest possible inside this rule. But so this is why we didn't start it from scratch. So we just have a basic set of rules, and our work is to go as fast as possible. Again, that's pretty basic, but the only thing we try to do is just to go faster. so that's why, I mean, we are really at the beginning of a new era in sailing. So we can really, I'm pretty sure we can improve, and I'm pretty sure we can have even a better design, better technology. And I mean, this summer is going to be great because we're going to have several teams. They work individually on this design, so we can have competition. You saw we have 2 boats here, so we have already some internal competition just to get up to speed. But I mean, every day we go sailing, we just learn new stuff, and it's a new dimension for that. So I think it's great for the sport, and it's going to be awesome. In September, we're going to see what's happening.
Oh, we'll see.
Yeah.
We'll see how your designs do, right?
Exactly.
So I know we wanted to have some time to open it up for questions. So who has questions for either of us?
The original class rules didn't anticipate foiling, and obviously the Kiwis figured that out, and now everyone's followed. Could you elaborate a little bit on how, is that just because you're able to get more lift than was anticipated, or can you talk a little bit about how the transition to foiling happened?
I think I mean, it's a natural development in the sense that, again, what we try to do is to reduce drag. So basically, our main job is to reduce the drag as much as possible. And what's happening is one big source of drag is the hull itself. So traditionally, I mean, foiling is not new in the sailing world, and I've been foilers before, and so it's a natural thing to try to lift the boat. And initially in the rule, the people that wrote the rule, they try to avoid that because it's kind of, I mean, a bit dangerous, and I mean, it's a bit tricky to manage, but they try to do that. But I mean, figure out a way to do that anyway. And so the Kiwi were the first one to release picture of their foiling. I mean, we've been sailing on our smaller catamarans, and we've been flying as well. So it's just like we did a lot of experiment on the 45-footer, which is the smaller scale of this boat. And so it's just a natural development. And because you try to reduce drag, you end up foiling, and you figure out the solution to be able to foil and to fly inside the rule. So it's kind of whenever we do fast multi-hulls, you end up in this. I'm pretty sure we're going to end up in this kind of situation, and I'm pretty sure we're going to see more and more boats like that because it's just like it's faster. So
you mentioned the constraints that are introduced by the rules of the race,
yep.
And also. I mean, I'm not a big expert on America's Cup, but like noticing a lot of people running around the boat. Obviously, you know, sailing is a team sport and all of that. But let's say that you had absolute freedom to remove all of those constraints, and if that, are there chances that will change? The constraints will change over time, based on the new designs and so on. And the second one, are those people really still needed? Can you like replace them with?
Technology.
Or is it just because of the tradition?
So to answer the first part of the question, I mean, that's interesting in the America's Cup is we're still racing. So we have a race course, and so we need to go upwind, we need to go downwind. So we need to have a proper race. So there is a lot of compromise. So you can tune a boat for going upwind, you can tune your boat for downwind, and it's very interesting because you have to trade off different operating conditions, and depending on what you do, you can end up with different design. For example, our 2 boats, they are slightly different in terms of tuning. So one is better upwind, one is better downwind. So we need to figure out which one is the best, what's the best solution. So we don't do a boat for speed record, you know. If you have to do a boat for speed record, and they can go faster, the speed record right now is like 65 knots, something like that. But it's a machine that it's impossible to sail in the bay. So we really have an envelope, and I think America's Cup is still a boat. It's still a race. So you're gonna have mark rounding, and you have a starting line, a finishing line, and you have to go upwind and downwind. So it's still inside the rule. So I don't think this envelope will disappear. And the second part of your question was more about simulation, right? I mean,
like people.
Yeah, the people. Yeah, exactly. So what's interesting here is for us, I mean, we struggle to model how to drive a boat. So if you give to a computer the power to drive the boat, it's not that easy to do. And the guys, they are like just incredible. They feel the wind, how to react, anticipate, and everything. And we are still at a level where I don't think we are really able to capture the skills of the sailors for that. So we still need them to go fast, and they are extremely good for that. So when we give them a machine, they are able to say, okay, that's what we can do with that. So that's the envelope of performance. And so you still want people on board first because it's a sport. So you want you want people involved, but also because it's still the fastest solution. So what's happening is it's interesting because in my few times I met people from Formula One industry or from the aeronautic world, and I've been asking more or less the same question: is how do you model the human behavior to make sure that we can understand exactly what's happening? And in Formula One, you have a lot of money involved and a lot of people, and even more in aeronautics, where you go in Airbus or Boeing. And even these guys, they still give simulators to their pilots just to make sure that they can collect the proper information, which is a proof that you still need somebody to drive the machine and to drive it faster.
So I get that part, like you still need the skipper, but like the people that are just running around pulling winches and just basically are being used as a weight, are those tradition?
No, it's probably a tradition in the sense that we don't. It's the only source of energy is need to be human. So we don't have any engine, So we use hydraulics to handle the loads, but the hydraulic pumps are driven by the sailors. So
can you reduce the number of people significantly?
Without the human power, it's going to be hard to trim the boat. So you need this because you need like a certain amount of energy to handle the loads. So on these boats, there are 11 on board, and they would be happy with more people. It's such hard work that you need these guys. So without any external source of energy, you will need these people.
So you need all 11 to work this boat. If you put more, it's going to be an overkill. If you put less, it's basically going to be... it's an optimized solution.
Exactly, because if you put less, you will have less people to be able to trim the boat, so you're probably going to be slower. If you put more, you add weight, which is you try to be as light as possible. So yes, you need. At the end, it's a good compromise, but that again, it's still a sailboat, so you need only use human power and the wind just to go. So.
Hi. Is there an optimal amount for the boat to heel? I noticed in the video that sometimes the upwind hydrofoil is in the water, but not always. Do you want it in there for the control surface or out for less drag? Can you talk about those kinds of issues?
Yeah, so what's happening is, so the boat is, is what I was mentioning earlier, it's a very complex machine, so you need to find the proper balance between what's happening above the water and what's happening below the water. And obviously when you go against the wind, when you go upwind, it's intuitively it's harder. You go a bit slower because you are going against the wind, and so you are the speed you are reaching are slower. Even if upwind, we still go 20-25 knots upwind, so against the wind, and so overall you go slower. So you're gonna need to it's harder to generate the lift to lift the boat above the water. So you've got a trade-off between the amount of, I mean, you need to, when you create a force, it's going to create drag. So if you need to create the 7 tons on the foil upwind, it's possible, but it's going to obviously create some drag. And then you're going to lift your hull, and you're going to reduce the drag of the hull. So it's a trade-off between how much you reduce the hydro drag and how much drag you add by creating this force on the foil. So roughly, I mean, what right now with these boats, when you go upwind, you still have the leeward hull is still immersed, and when you go downwind, we're able to fly. I mean, with winds of below 10 knots, we can already be foiling. So it's quite. I mean, it's all a matter of compromise. There's a trade-off between the upwind and downwind and the condition. Yeah.
I have 2 questions. One, the bay is notorious for its conditions in terms of wind changes and so forth. So I'm just wondering how much that went into your design. And then a completely different question. You talked about racing. Over time, stuff developed in racing cars has come down to ordinary, independent suspension, various things like this. When can I expect a wing sail on my 35-foot keelboat?
I will be very happy to put one on your boat if you want. Honestly, especially for the sailing community, I think it's much simpler to handle. So it's easier to sail, easier to understand. You can maneuver your boat with more efficiency. So, I mean, obviously, logistically, it's a bit complex. So if you can solve the logistical issue, I'm pretty sure that it can. I mean, we see more and more rigid wings, and the good thing about America's Cup, it's a good good publicity for these wings, and probably in the future you can see that. And I will even be happy to put wings on a cargo ship or something like that, just to save gas, So it's just like a kind of solution which is quite reliable. And regarding your other question about the condition in the bay, I mean, we spend a lot of time studying the condition, the current. We have historical data about the previous years, and if somebody can tell me what's going to be the weather on 7th of September, I mean, that takes the information straight away, Because we can obviously tune our boat, so it's a bit of an unknown, but I would love to know the weather in September for the race.
So my question is about the technological advances, and obviously it's great to see all the engineering going in those boats, but I feel like it makes it harder for competitors to catch up and more expensive as well. In particular, we went from 12 or so challengers to 3 this year. So what?
Maybe you should answer. You know more.
Yeah. So what do you see the future of the America's Cup based on that?
I think there will be a scaling back of the size of the boats. That's what Russell Coutts has said to me. But I think that the going from 12 contenders to 3 largely was a result of the economy at the time and the mortgage crisis that spread abroad and really caused global problems, especially in Europe, and caused a number of the teams that were in Europe to pull out of the race. So I think the objective, from what I've heard from the key players, including Larry Ellison, is to make this more accessible. I mean, it's never been a race that has been accessible to all. The history of the America's Cup is that you really need a fat wallet, and so I don't think that's going to change, but I think the boats will be scaled down a bit in size. That's what I've been told. They interestingly enough, so Russell Coutts said to me that they had the AC-45s, which they use for the World Series regattas, but they were looking at a boat. They needed a boat that would look big enough and imposing enough and enough like an America's Cup boat on television, where you would see it and say, this is definitely an America's Cup boat. And so they went to the 72s. But they found out in retrospect that the AC-45s were also really fantastic looking for the mass media market. So I think that there will be a bit of a bit of a scaling down. What have you heard about that?
Also,
about the boats?
obviously you've got less competitors, but what we need to keep in mind is the level of the competition is very high. So, I mean, it's still America's Cup, and it's not easy to win. So we need to keep that, because if it's still a tough challenge. And right now, with less, I mean, even if we have less team, the level of racing is incredibly high. So it's gonna be a tough win for sure. So this is one of the goals of the America's Cup, and it's for sure this is going to be the case.
Yeah, Jimmy Spithill told me that in the past America's Cup you've had a dozen contenders, but only 3 or 4 really viable competitors. And so now you don't have that dozen, but you have the really tough, viable competitors that you're going up against.
I've been involved in the campaign with Oracle in 2007, and we had this group of, we call that the big four. So even if there are 12 competitors, we still have the big four, which is really the tough competitors. So you knew before that these guys will be in semifinals. So at the end, maybe we went straight to the big four, but it's just like obviously there is some background that Julian described.
So I have a comment and a couple questions. One of the comment is, do you think that or I guess it's a question, do you think that the viable competitors, is it a sport competition type competitiveness, or is it a financial competition?
It's so multifaceted. So you have to have the engineering and the designing side, and then you have to have the material part of it, the builders who know where to get the best grade of carbon fiber. So it's all of those components that you absolutely have to have, which makes it so complex, and also so intellectually stimulating for those involved. Having all that money around America's Cup, it helps to develop this kind of technology, and we're gonna see this technology in the future, and it helps improving the sport as well. So it's expensive, but in comparison with the sport, it's not that expensive overall.
How do you keep the boat from flying completely out of the water and losing control?
We need to find a subtle balance between. A boat is basically an unstable machine, so it can capsize. So we need to bring some stability, and so we can, by playing with the shape of the foils, we can bring some stability. So when the boat is flying, you can maintain a stable flight. And but this kind of foils or this kind of shapes often is draggy, so it just kind of create too much drag. So it's okay, it's flying, but it's not that fast. So we need to find where to put the cursor between the performance, so the speed, and the stability. So the sailors should be comfortable at flying the boat and still be fast. So it's part of our research and development, is where to find this balance. And so overall, we ended up with a situation where we've got a pretty unstable machine, and we've got some input from the crew to maintain the flight. So for example, in our case, we've got this horizontal wing hydrofoil, so with an horizontal surface that are immersed, and we can change the angle of attack depending on the altitude. So basically the crew is playing with this angle, so we can manually adjust the flight from the crew. And so we need to find the correct balance between stability and performance, and it is like part of our day-to-day job.
Final question, can I get a ride?
It's not my call.
It's fun.
Yeah.
It's something else. I was on one of the AC-45s and had quite a ride, yeah. Yeah, it's great.
You can come and see the races. You're going to be races tomorrow.
Yeah, the racing, the two-boat racing starts
yeah.
tomorrow, so check it out.
You mentioned earlier that when you went to the fixed wing, that there was sort of a negotiation period with sailors because they were not used to flying that. So what were the most significant ways in which you had to overcome a sailor's natural inclinations? Basically, what are the significant differences between flying a standard sail and a fixed wing?
It's still a sailboat, so it's doing the same. So you try to propel your boat, so it's just doing the same thing, except that the tool you're using to create the thrust is different. So we just need to make sure that the sailors understand that they still try to create some thrust, and it's like a normal sail plan, except that the tool you're using is different. So the way you create this force is different. So the only thing is to teach them what are the settings that will be okay to recreate what was happening before. And then, so initially it was a bit complex for them, because you rely more on numbers and data and everything. Where I remember during the 2010 campaign, where we had this one of the quote that you're gonna find in the book is normally a sailor look at his sail, and check how it's in the air. And when you go in an aircraft, the pilot doesn't look at his wing, So it's just like, I just need to get used to that. But overall, at the end, the sailor still use his feeling and how the boat is loaded and how the boat reacts. So now they are at a level where they can use it properly.